Anybody running for president or vice president should take a cognitive test. So I've taken 3. No president, think of this, has ever taken 1. The first question is very easy, and they always show the first question is, you have a lion, a bear, an alligator, and what's another good? A squirrel, okay? Which is the squirrel?
I am so glad that we have a president who can differentiate between an alligator and a squirrel.
What initially began as another effort by Donald Trump to demonstrate his mental sharpness quickly evolved into one of the most widely discussed late-night television moments of the week. Within just a few hours, 2 of America's most influential comedy voices were already taking aim at him from different angles. And the more Trump attempted to clarify and defend his position, the more attention the story attracted. First, Desi Lydic entered the conversation, followed soon after by Jimmy Kimmel. By the time Trump responded online, millions of viewers had already seen and shared the clips. But this wasn't just another cycle of political humor. The jokes were tied to a deeper debate about judgment, public image, and whether Trump himself is fueling these controversies through his own actions. Donald Trump has long positioned himself as someone comfortable with confrontation. For decades, he has faced criticism from opponents while receiving strong defense from supporters, and he has consistently responded in real time, sometimes through large public rallies, sometimes in interviews, and increasingly through social media platforms. However, every so often, a moment arises that feels almost perfectly designed for late-night comedy. This was one of those moments. The situation escalated after Trump once again spoke.
I am so glad that we have a president who can differentiate between an alligator and a squirrel. Unlike President Coolidge, God rest his soul. But Trump struggling to remember all the animals isn't a surprise. In fact, maybe that should... At this point, I'm not even sure there was even a test. I feel like there's a good chance the president was just watching Zootopia. You know what? Maybe small business owners aren't the best audience for Donald Trump.
About cognitive testing, a subject he has referenced multiple times over the years. While speaking to reporters, he confidently mentioned passing cognitive assessments and described elements of those tests in a way that quickly drew public attention. Supporters interpreted it as confidence and reassurance. Critics, however, viewed it as unnecessary self-congratulation over what they considered standard expectations. And that is where Desi Lydic became part of the story. What followed next completely shifted the direction of the conversation, as Desi Lydic wasn't simply delivering jokes. She was pointing out what she described as a recurring pattern. In her segment, she highlighted how Trump's descriptions of cognitive tests appear to change over time. In one version, certain animals are mentioned. In another, the examples differ entirely. The details seem to shift, yet one constant remains. Trump consistently insists that he performed flawlessly. That observation quickly became a source of comedy material, and online audiences immediately amplified it. Clips spread rapidly across social media platforms. Comment sections filled up within minutes. Reaction videos began circulating almost instantly. Meanwhile, political supporters and critics entered heated discussions over what his comments actually implied. But before that debate could settle, another public appearance by Trump intensified the spotlight.
There we go. That's more your speed. Now you can talk about animals until your heart's content.
The power of a nuclear weapon is something I don't even want to talk about. We can't let Iran have a nuclear weapon. You might be too young for this.
No, they're not too young. I'm sure they've already seen the Paw Patrol episode where they drop a ballistic missile on Humdinger.
This time, the setting was an event involving children and physical fitness at the White House. Typically the kind of occasion that produces light, positive coverage. Instead, it unfolded very differently. Observers noted that the discussion quickly expanded far beyond youth health and fitness. The speech moved into topics such as international conflicts, political disputes, and broader cultural issues. Subjects many viewers felt were unexpected for such an event. The reaction was immediate. Commentators questioned why a children-focused program had turned into a wide-ranging political address. Late-night hosts took notice, news organizations highlighted it, and social media amplified it further. The story was rapidly gaining momentum. Then came another moment that drew even more attention from reporters. While Desi Lydic focused on Trump's speeches, Jimmy Kimmel shifted the discussion in a completely different direction toward finances. At first, the issue seemed unrelated to the earlier controversies. However, it soon became another point of criticism. The focus was a proposed ballroom project associated with the White House. Trump had previously suggested that private donations and external funding would support the development. Supporters saw it as an ambitious...
And why are we building a $200 million ballroom in the White House? Is it possible that he's doing it intentionally so we could be mad about that instead of the Epstein list? The White House will have slot machines and a water slide. Trump is in major change the subject mode. On Friday, he stopped by the always friendly morning crew at Fox. Whenever Trump goes on Fox and Friends, it's funny because the hosts are so eager for him to be reasonable. They spell it all out for him. They desperately want to avoid having to nod along with anything crazy or contradict him. So they give him the question and their preferred answer.
Improvement project. Critics, however, raised concerns about potential costs and financial transparency, as reports emerged suggesting broader funding discussions and the possibility of taxpayer involvement, particularly regarding security and related expenses. The issue became prime material for late-night commentary. Jimmy Kimmel quickly addressed what he saw as inconsistencies. His argument was straightforward. If the project was meant to be privately funded, why were public resources suddenly being discussed? Whether audiences agreed with his interpretation or not, the segment achieved exactly what late-night television aims for: attention, debate, and widespread sharing. At this stage, the narrative had expanded well beyond cognitive testing, public speeches, and White House events. Everything began to merge into a larger discussion, centered on public perception and whether Trump was unintentionally creating political challenges for himself. By this point, the original incident was no longer the main focus. The most significant political impact was only beginning to unfold because the key element of the entire situation wasn't the comedy itself. It was Trump's reaction. In modern politics, a familiar pattern often repeats itself. Criticism generates headlines, but the response generates even bigger ones. That is exactly what happened here. After the segments gained traction, Trump responded publicly. He criticized late-night hosts, questioned their credibility, challenged their talent, and expressed frustration with media networks that continue to feature them. For his supporters, this response demonstrated strength and refusal to remain silent. They saw a leader actively pushing back against media criticism. However, critics interpreted it differently. They argued that each response only amplified the situation further. Every post created new headlines. Every statement generated additional viral clips, and every attempt to shut down the discussion seemed to expand its reach instead. This reflects a long-standing paradox in Trump's political communication style. His ability to dominate media attention is one of his strongest assets, but it also carries consequences. Because once a narrative enters public discussion, it often grows independently. In this case, comedians didn't rely on hidden information or private sources. They used Trump's own public speeches and appearances. That is part of why the segments resonated so widely. The material was visible, accessible, and easily shareable. For some viewers, the humor felt unfair. For others, it felt justified. But almost everyone agreed on one point: the clips were impossible to ignore. And that may be the central takeaway. Modern politics is no longer shaped only by policy. It is also driven by perception, viral moments, and who controls the narrative. For several days, that narrative was dominated by Desi Lydic, Jimmy Kimmel, and the online circulation of clips. Meanwhile, Trump's responses kept the cycle alive even longer. In the end, the story wasn't only about late-night comedy or Donald Trump himself. It reflected the broader mechanics of modern political communication. A single comment becomes a joke, the joke becomes a headline, the headline becomes a national debate, and the response restarts the cycle again. Regardless of perspective, one fact remains clear. Millions watched, millions reacted, and once again, Donald Trump became the center of a major political media cycle. Which raises the final question: was the real controversy the original comments or the reaction that followed?